Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dear friends, today I'm taking a sutta that was suggested by one of the students, and it happens to fit right in with everything we've been discussing. Perhaps it's the nature of the Dhamma, that the Dhamma fits together, and one could turn to different sections and find a good mutual beneficial relationship among each facet of these teachings. We were talking last week about the Brahma realm as distinguished from the Kamaloka realm, and the Brahma realm being part of the Rupaloka realm, with the idea that as we are being here in the Kamaloka, the world of sense desire, we are subjected to craving and aversion arising from the five senses. And I include in that craving and aversion arising from emotions, which may partly include something mental, but which is manifesting in the five senses of the body. And then we were considering different skillful ways to disengage and gain some level of detachment from that reactivity to the five senses, including practicing the divine abidings, the Brahma Viharas, as a way of being able to, in combination with other factors, one of the ways of entering into the jhana meditation, and as well a way to put the mind into a boundless space, into a mind or a heart, a citta, without limitations. And being without limitations, then the little things that impress on the five senses might be not that consequential in compared to the vastness of boundless space. And now, today, the sutta we're coming to is particularly focused on the teaching of emptiness, non-self. So if we practice in a way which is empty of the delusion of self, then we will also, in a very useful, practical, and immediate way, be detached from reactions of greed and aversion arising from the five senses. So this wisdom of insight into non-self is another way to begin to gain some security from the adversities of this realm of sense desire. So having given that little bit of preamble, I think we can go right ahead and read the sutta. I made a mistake in the email. I said that Saccaka was a Brahmin, but he was not. He was a Jain. So, but he talks like a Brahmin, so we'll see. In any case, this is the shorter discourse with Saccaka, who was a person. The Buddha was staying near Vesali at the Great Wood in the hall with the peaked roof. Now, at that time, Saccaka, the son of Jain parents, was staying in Vesali. He was a debater and clever speaker deemed holy by many people. He was telling the crowd in Vesali, "I don't see any ascetic or Brahmin who would not shake and rock and tremble, sweating from the armpits, were I to take them on in debate. Not a leader of an order or a community, or the tutor of a community, and not even one who claims to be a perfected one, a fully awakened Buddha. Even an insentient post would shake, rock, and tremble were I to take it on in debate. How much more than a human being?" One of the qualities that we aspire to is to be imperturbable, or one who doesn't get shaken up and is not quaking and shaking and trembling. Although there is to be said, the Pali word for, it's translated as sympathy, is called anukampang. When we ask the Buddha to do something, we say, out of sympathy, would you do this for us? That has got the word in it of kampati, which means shaking. And it's like as if somebody who is sympathetic, they would like vibrate in a sensitivity to the people around them, and particularly if they see dukkha around them. There's this idea of vibrating in sympathy, but it's not saying that the Buddha becomes upset, or that an enlightened person or a person who's imperturbable, that kind of person is not getting upset because they see the suffering in the world. They're able to, in a sympathetic way, to know the reality of the suffering in the world, and yet because of their noble qualities, they still stand apart from that, and they still have a certain kind of a detachment from it. Bhante Gunaratana used to say that the Buddha knows dukkha, but he doesn't participate in dukkha. So he knows suffering, but he's not caught up in suffering. This is sort of a different meaning that we see in a lot of mythologies about the gods, and in this case the debater causing somebody to shake. Now at that point, Venerable Assaji robed up in the morning, and taking his bowl and robe entered Vesali for alms. As Saccaka was going for a walk, he saw Assaji coming off in the distance. Assaji is one of the 5 disciples of the Buddha. And who knows the most famous sentence spoken by Assaji? Do you know it, Venerable Marajana? And what was that sentence?
The sentences of those things that arise from a cause, their cause and their cessation, the Blessed One has told.
Yeah, that's it. So when Sariputta approached Asaji, Asaji had been going on the alms round just like this. And Sariputta was so polite, he waited until after Asaji had completed his alms round and had his meal. And then when he went to take his time for a meditation following the meal, then Sariputta approached and asked a question about, like, who is your teacher and what is his Dhamma? In this case, Saccaka is the opposite. He doesn't wait 1 minute. He just goes right up in the middle of the alms round. He approached Saccaka and greeted him. The greetings and polite conversation were over. Saccaka stood to one side and said to Asaji, Mr. Asaji, how does the ascetic Gautama guide his disciples? And on what topics does instruction to his disciples generally proceed? And now Asaji addresses him by his clan name. Agivesana is the clan. This is how the ascetic Gautama guides his disciples, and his disciples proceed on these topics: form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness are impermanent. Form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness are not self. All conditions are impermanent. All things are not self. That's how the ascetic guides his disciples, and how instruction to his disciples generally proceeds. He answers, it's sad to hear, Master Asaji, that the ascetic Gautama has such a doctrine. Hopefully sometime or other I'll go meet Mr. Gautama and we can have a discussion. Hopefully I can dissuade him from this harmful misconception. What Bhikkhu Abhante Sujata is translating as Mr. is the Pali word bo, which is it means brother, and it's a term that you would use if you were speaking to somebody who was your equal, but it wouldn't be the term that you'd use to address somebody who's superior to you. I'm going to pause here and we can discuss what we just read. Richard, are you going to bring out an important point about this summary of the Dhamma?
Thank you. When Buddha became enlightened and he's wondering whether he should attempt to teach or not, he specifically says that this specific causation, this dependent origination, is very subtle and very, can be very difficult to understand. So we see when Sariputta approaches Asaji, he asks him, what is the doctrine of the teacher? And so he imparts in his own way that idea, dependent origination, that which arises, will cease, right? So here he asks a very different question. He asks, how does the Buddha teach his disciples? The disciple has already been, Sariputta is just saying, what's his doctrine? He's not a disciple yet. Here, he's asking, how does he teach his disciples? And this follows the second sermon of the Buddha, where he describes what's not self. So the Buddha first convinces his disciples with the first sermon, in which Kondona understands, all that which is subject to arising is subject to cessation. Now, when they all become disciples, in the second most, I'm sure there was some teaching in between, but in the second most famous sermon, he's teaching this. Okay, this is what he teaches the disciples. In other words, how to break free from the habitual thinking of the body and everything as the self, and the khandhas, etc. Anyways, that's just a point I wanted to bring up. Thank you for listening.
And did you notice something missing from that summary?
He doesn't mention dukkha.
Right.
But I think it's because dukkha is the motivation once you understand the problem, right? He talks about paticca samuppada comes down to suffering, right? It descends from ignorance or incomplete knowledge down to suffering, and then suddenly it takes a turn. So once one gets that idea of suffering, then one starts looking for truth, and then it goes up through, I think, another 11 or 12 stages
Right.
until finally one attains nibbana at the top.
Yeah.
So suffering is like a tipping point. It's a turning point when one gets that idea in their mind, understands it. Thank you for listening.
It seems that the teachers and the commentators did feel like they needed to explain why Assaji decided not to mention dukkha at this point. And then when they go to the Buddha in a couple more sentences, the Buddha approves of this teaching as it's stated. He doesn't give a correction, say, oh, you forgot dukkha. It seems that in the commentary, they think that Saccaka being such a negative personality already, that they would lose him before he started to listen if they brought out dukkha as being one of the three characteristics at that point. Or alternatively, they think that Saccaka and his colleagues were somewhat preoccupied with their ideas about the self. And so that they wanted to put the focus there. So that's that so far. In this morning's guided meditation that we did, I was actually inviting the meditators to try to come to a place that was as spacious and still as possible. And I don't know if I was doing this consciously or not, but I was thinking in terms of the boundless spaciousness of space and sort of a combination with that, watching the air element. So with the ever-changing changeability of the air element, you see impermanence, continuous impermanence. And then with the boundlessness of boundless space, you see non-self. And I brought into the meditation the idea of dukkha. It's almost like inviting the mind to say, oh, there's the hindrances, here's the difficulties, here's the problems, and all kind of things that would be sort of like being aware of those things that are disturbances to the mind. But if during that part of the meditation we're trying to aim for a maximum level of keeping the mind calm, then that impermanent and no self, both of those are very calming kind of meditations, not creating a disturbance. It's just my thought. Ananya had a hand up a second ago. Did you want to speak?
Yeah, well, it's like I generally don't care for as much for Bhikkhu Sujato's, Bhante Sujato's translation as I do Bhikkhu Bodhi. But one thing he's done that if others maybe have already caught on to this or seen it, how he has taken his notes and put them right in the body of the sutta is really excellent. So he goes through this whole thing that you're presently discussing and what the sources are for that. So I just wanted to mention that in case someone has not seen that yet. And also this thing that you start, or the theme from this morning, I really, really like this approach, because so much of meditation is we're trying to eliminate things, especially in the beginning. And this is a way to really reinforce the calmness that's already there, and that you can ways to keep it there, as opposed to, simply just more of the Vipassana approach. Well, I'm not saying don't do Vipassana, because it is essential, but there's a point at which this having that sense of emptiness, spaciousness, the way you're presenting this, I really, really like it. And along this line, since the theme is compassion and emptiness, I don't know also if people are aware, but you can download Bhante Analayo's meditation from BC, Barry Center for Buddhist Studies, BC, yes. His whole from the whole book is the companion to the whole book, and it's for free.
Thank you for mentioning that. And I think what I might do is someone might put it in the chat here if they have the link, but the next time we send out the weekly letter, I can start adding as a footnote to that the links to the few books. There's the talks on Dharma Seed, and there's his book, which is also free, and then he's got a second book about the meditation on emptiness. He said that in Compassion and Emptiness, he didn't give enough explanation about the meditation on emptiness. And so that's what the second book
anyway,
is about.
So these are actual his guided meditations, and I'll see if I can put a link in chat. Otherwise, I can send you an email with the link. And also that particular book, Emptiness and Compassion, you can also download the PDF of that in case you don't have the book, the hard copy.
Okay, let's go back to the sutta and read on a little bit longer. Now at that time, around 500 Lichavis were sitting together at the town hall on some business. Then Saccaka went up to them and said, "Come forth, good Lichavis, come forth. Today I'm going to have a discussion with the ascetic Gautama. If he stands by the position stated to me by one of his well-known disciples, a mendicant named Assaji, I'll take him on in debate and drag him to and fro and round about like a strong man would grab a fleecy sheep and drag it to and fro and round about. Taking him on in debate, I'll drag him to and fro and round about like a strong brewer's worker would toss a large brewer's sieve into a deep lake, grab it by the corners and drag it to and fro and round about. Taking him on in debate, I'll shake him down and about and give him a beating, like a strong brewer's mixer would grab a strainer by the corners and shake it down and about and give it a beating. I'll play a game of ear-washing with the ascetic Gautama, like a 60-year-old elephant would plunge into a deep lotus pond and play a game of ear-washing. Come forth, good Lichavis, come forth. Today I'm going to have a discussion with the ascetic Gautama." At that, some of the Lichavis said, "How can the ascetic Gautama refute Saccaka's doctrine when it is Saccaka who will refute Gautama's doctrine?" But some of the Lichavis said, "Who is Saccaka to refute the Buddha's doctrine when it is the Buddha who will refute Saccaka's doctrine?" Then Saccaka, escorted by 500 Lichavis, went to the hall with the peaked roof and the great wood. At that time, several mendicants were walking mindfully in the open air. Then Saccaka went up to them and said, "Good sirs, where is Mr. Gautama at present? We want to see him." They answered, "Agivesana, the Buddha has plunged into the great wood, sitting at the root of the tree for the day's meditation." Then Saccaka, together with a large group of Lichavis, went to see the Buddha in the great wood, exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side. Before sitting down to one side, some of the Lichavis bowed. Some exchanged greetings and polite conversation. Some held up their joined palms towards the Buddha. Some announced their name and clan, while some kept silent. So it's a mixture of different attitudes towards the Buddha. Saccaka said, I'd like Mr. Gautama about a certain point. I'd like to ask about a certain point if you take time to answer. Ask what you wish, Givesana. How does Mr. Gautama guide his disciples? What topics does he instruct? This is how I guide my disciples, and my instruction to the disciples generally proceed on these topics. Form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness are impermanent. Form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness are not self. All conditions are impermanent. All things are not self. This is how I guide my disciples and how instructions to my disciples generally proceeds. So in this particular context, why the particular list of the 5 khandhas is the theme for this reflection: the form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. We hear in our tradition that this is what factors are aspects that an average person thinks of when they think about themselves, or who am I? I'm not completely sure that if you went to a modern person and asked them, like, what is it that makes you into you? What is it that gives you your identity? If a person would come up with this particular list, but this list is something that comes up in one of the Vedic teachings. In one of the some of the earliest of the teachings, that these were like 5 aspects of the self. So they would say there's the form self, a feeling self, a perception self, a karma self. So the sankhara is, in that context, is thought of as the karma, and then the cognizing self. And so, since this is a debate that's sort of in the context of that background, that's one reason why this list does come along. I've worked with this set of aspects of experience and for a long time, and it's tremendously helpful to reflect and think and to understand what these factors are and how they work together, how each one is like an essential part of going from the raw data of what we experience and converting it into something that has got some meaning for us, something that we know what to do, or something that we respond naturally to. So we can't experience anything in this world without the material body being engaged in some way. even if it's so much as the vibration of the eardrum creating the electrical vibrations that come through as sound, or even so much as focusing the eyes in order to see, or even so much as experiencing the entire body to either be activated or to be relaxed, that the body is engaged. Feeling is always engaged in our experience. If you were not in touch with feeling, you wouldn't be able to have the motivation to do most of the ordinary things that you do. So that's the fuel of our experience. Perception is how we distinguish any object from its surrounding background, and how we begin to think that a particular object that we perceive in a certain way has got a unity. So, like this is a cup. Okay, so every molecule in the cup is part of the cup, and it's all sort of like unified together, like this whole thing all together is a cup, and all the parts of it are parts of the cup. And there is the identification with these things as it goes along, a cumulative building up of an experience about a self, and identification with, so that one's own natural, sort of like a reflexive kind of self, like I'd like a sip of tea. So that's a kind of a reflexive action based on a very simple, ordinary sense of self. But then how we react and respond to the being driven around by feelings, what our perceptions are, and our belief, if we have a belief that what we perceive is true and everything else is false, can contribute to a rapid development of a view, which has got a kind of a hard self at the center, and then that it's said in the Vedic text that you could compare the self to the salt in the ocean. So every drop of water in the entire ocean contains salt. And so just the same way they said, every moment of anything that can be experienced has got the self, according to that doctrine. Choice is karma. This is like the big struggle, or the great theme of debate among the many schools at that time, was how the results of our intentional actions come back to and are experienced by us, and how the self fits onto that. There's different ideas about that, and then the knowing faculty. So all of these things are part of self, and so this is the powerful, unique, different teaching, is to say they're impermanent and they're not self. Impermanent and not self. This is the radical, absolutely radical, in contrast to the general trend of thinking of the various religious thinkers, not to mention the trend of thinking about the ordinary people. And then this other sentence here, Sabbe Sankara Anicca, Sabbe Dhamma Anattati. All conditions or sankharas are impermanent. In this case, sankhara is thought to have the meaning of everything that it was created as a result of if it came into existence, it must cease. If it arises, it must cease. So all conditioned things are impermanent. And the second sentence, all dhammas are not self. It's implied here, or it's understood here, that there are some dhamma in the sense of a phenomenon, which is permanent. The tradition in the commentary is that the nibbana element is a dhamma in the sense that a person, a human being, is able to experience nibbana. It's not something that only exists in some different realm that we're not able to experience. It's something that we are able to experience. And one of the meaning of a fundamental meaning of Dhamma, as called like phenomena, is things that a person is able to experience. What can be held in the mind is a Dhamma. So in another way, I've heard it explained by Piatan and Bhante Sujato that this also refers to elements of the nature of reality which are explained by the Buddha. So one aspect of the nature of reality is all conditioned things are impermanent. So that's a Dhamma in the sense that it's a rule of nature, and it's very clearly said that at all times, whether the Buddha exists or doesn't exist, no matter what the conditions are, it's always true that all conditioned things are impermanent. And so that kind of Dhamma, so it's permanently impermanent, it's permanently true that everything is impermanent, but that Dhamma still does not take on the characteristic of possessing a self or being a self. So I shall ask if anybody can say how this helps you in practicing. How does it help you to keep your mind pure and to gain in meditation and move towards liberation if you understand these teachings about all conditioned things impermanent, all dhammas without a self? I might have to call on Ayamarajana to answer, if you can. Answer if you can.
One of the things that I do before I start meditating is that I can pick out concrete examples of the day for each of the 5 khandhas and understand it through that experience that it was empty of self, because I make mistakes. Things happen that if there were self, what self would possibly want that action or result? So it's a very good way to use the khandhas and concrete examples of anyone's day to verify this on one's own with just no prior experience of nibbana needed.
Right. Exactly. Let's read on a little further. Now here comes Saccaka's rebuttal. A simile strikes me, Mr. Gautama. Oh, then speak as you feel inspired, said the Buddha. All the plants and seeds that achieve growth, increase, and maturity do so depending on earth and grounded on the earth. This is definitely a Jain teaching. All the hard work that gets done depends on the earth and is grounded on the earth. In the same way, an individual self is form, grounded on form. They create merit and wickedness. An individual self is feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. Grounded on consciousness, they create merit and wickedness. Agivesana, are you not saying this? Form is myself, feeling myself, perception myself, choices are myself, consciousness is myself. Indeed, Master Gautama, that is what I am saying. And this big crowd agrees with me. What has this big crowd to do with you? Please unpack your own statement. Then, Mr. Gautama, what I'm saying is this. Form is myself. Feeling is myself. Perception is myself. Choices are myself. Consciousness is myself. In this case, I think he's ill-wiggling. When he's challenged, he reverses himself. Well, then I'll give Asana. I'll ask you in return. You can answer like this. What do you think? Consider an anointed aristocrat king, such as Pasenadi of Kosala, or Ajatasattu of Magadha, son of the princess of Videha. Would they have the power in their own realm to execute those who have incurred execution, find those who have incurred fines, or banish those who have incurred banishment? An anointed king would have such power, Mr. Gautama. Even federations such as the Vajis and Malas have such power in their own realm. So, of course, an anointed king such as Pasenadi or Ajatasattu would achieve such power, as is their right. When you say form is myself, do you have the power over form to say, may my form be like this, may it not be like that? When he said this, Saccaka kept silent. The Buddha asked a second time. Still he kept silent. The Buddha said, answer now. Agivesana, now is not the time for silence. If someone fails to answer a legitimate question when asked 3 times by the Buddha, their head explodes into 7 pieces there and then. Now, at that time, the spirit Vajrapani, this is a yaka, that would be like a demon. The demon takes up a burning iron thunderbolt, blazing and glowing, and stood in the air above Saccaka, thinking, if this Saccaka doesn't answer when asked a 3rd time, I'll blow his head into 7 pieces there and then. And both Buddha and Saccaka could see Vajrapani. Saccaka was terrified, shocked, and awestruck. Looking to the Buddha for shelter, protection, and refuge, he said, ask me, Mr. Gautama, I will answer. So what do you think when you say form is myself? Do you have the power over form to say, may my form be like this, may my form not be like that? No, Mr. Gautama. Think about it. You should think before answering. What you said before and what you said after don't match up. What do you think? When you say feeling is myself, do you have a power over feeling to say, may my feelings be like this, may it not be like that? No, Mr. Gautama. Think about it. You should say before answering. Same thing, perception. Volitional choices, or karma. And consciousness. In each case, he admits not having the power to say, may it be like this, may it not be like that. So this is, I think, what Maria was alluding to. Just checking my sound. Okay. When you're going through the day, and you may, we make so many mistakes. It's kind of obvious that the form and the feelings are the result of so many previous conditions. And even our thoughts, we would like to only think skillful, good, helpful, beneficial thoughts. But sometimes we think all different kinds of thoughts, and we can't help it. We can't stop ourselves. And this comes back to the previous teaching that Richard alluded to at the beginning of the class about causation, saying all things arise because of causes, and that's the reason why we don't unilaterally have the power to say, let them be like this, let them not be like that, because what we experience is the result of previous causes. What about sankhara or choices? Don't we at least have the ability to have control over what we choose right now? Okay, I'll let Richard answer that question.
Your camera seems to be turned off.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there it is. Now you're good. So there's what you might call the volitional primal sankhara, which is the due to volition that comes up in your mind. But that sankhara then can come out in three different ways. So it can be bodily, verbal, or like a formation in your brain, so to speak. It expands into something. And since we're talking about here the body and the senses and perception and what's coming in, you don't have control over that. So when all that comes together and then you see, all the different colors and shapes come together in your mind, or you hear sound in some way, birds singing or people talking, whatever, that's just manifesting in your mind, in your brain. You don't have control over that. You do have that low-level volitional control, but unfortunately, due to avidya, known as ignorance, I prefer incomplete knowledge, that colors what kind of sankhara comes up. So that's sort of interfering with your complete control of sankhara, whereas as an arahant, he has complete control. So when his mind has a volition of a sankhara, like he thinks, oh, let me go and teach the Dharma here or something like that. That's not based on sensual desire or anything like that. That's a complete, he is in that point in control of that sankhara, but that sankhara is that primal sankhara due to volition, chaitana, arising in the mind. Now, I debated whether I should bring this up, but I think I'll go ahead and bring it up. In that earlier section, when Buddha is saying what he teaches, and he says, I think I flipped the page. Oh, I did flip the page, I know. And he says, it's translated, I'm looking at Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. he says all formations are impermanent, and then he has a semicolon, all things are not self. But when you look at the Pali, you see a comma between the two statements within the sentence. So it appears that this all things, which is dhammas, it's dhamma with a long A, seems to be pointing back to the first section. So what it's saying is all formations are impermanent, and all of those formations, which are these dhammas, these objects, right? Those are not self. So that's the whole point. The five khandhas are not self, and that's what he's talking about here, these formations, right? The five khandhas are not self, okay? So because there are other places where it specifically says that all dhammas that are subject to arising are subject to cessation, and because of that, that means they can't be self, because they don't follow the definition of self. They're impermanent, all right, and they're impermanent also because they arise. So they arose seemingly out of nowhere, right, and then they cease in nowhere. So the classic definition of what was self is not met, and that's why they're not self. So, so it just this is just my opinion, but I think there's a doctrinal, you might say, tendency to go in a certain direction, and once you do that, your mind is colored, and you kind of miss other things because you're thinking something should go in this way. Now, on a separate note, I wanted to bring up the idea of the deity with the thunderbolt that's going to smash Saccaka's head into 7 pieces. I don't believe that a Buddha would ever put anyone in a situation where they would be harmed or hurt or anything like that in any way, shape, or form. It goes completely against the Buddha's nature, to agree that that's some kind of law of the universe that he has to participate in. I think that was originally like a colloquial saying, like we have certain types of sayings. I can't think of one right now off the top of my head, but the head itself is made of 7 bones. That's a medical fact. So I think what they were saying is that the weight is going to be so much on his mind, right? Because he can't deal with the situation, that it's going to cause him a tremendous amount of pain and suffering, possibly even a physical headache or something might manifest. I think that's what the Buddha would say. He was using that colloquial saying to say, you're going to be caught in this terrible quandary, and that's going to cause you a lot of difficulty, because when you leave this assembly, the Lichavis and others are going to, hey, how come you weren't able to answer that question? You claimed you could do anything, right? Drag the Buddha this way, and you can't do it. So it's going to end up in a lot of mental consternation, might be a good way to describe it for him. But I really don't believe that a Buddha would participate in anything like that. But again, that's my view. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.
I do have the idea that the people of the time were actually very much swept up with this idea that there is this great self that's like at the very center of existence, that is like coming from mythology, that there was some kind of a primordial existing something from which all of the diversity of all the variety of birds and butterflies and puppies and kittens all is this diversity is emerging from this primordial I'm going to call it an essence. Actually, recently I've got a thread in Sutra Central about Neoplatonism, which is Greek, kind of a Greek philosophy, which has got this very strong idea of this highest level of existence, which is indescribable, unknowable. It's represented as like an eclipse, like a dark vortex at the center of the universe, and all of reality is imagined to have being emanated down in different levels from that primordial, indescribable essence, and that then all of us, like when you talk about everything being, we're all one because we're all connected to the same essence, and so people got all caught up into that, and it's got a kind of a nice feeling to it, saying we're all one because we're all, children of God, or are all connected to some essence. And the thing that I find two things that I find really so lovely and encouraging in Buddhism is that this mysterious thought world of the religious people at the time, the Buddha has kind of a playful attitude, so that we don't get caught up in this woo-woo mystery magical thing about it, but instead looking at the evidence in a very kind of a simple way. And so, like, if we understand causation, we can actually see how we and everything that we experience, it is all interconnected. So we still have got the connection with all things because we're connected by way of the interactions of causation between different beings and different factors throughout the history of the world. And so there's not a separate, we don't have a separate essence, which is ourself, because of that interconnectedness of our experience. And so we still can have that sort of actually wholesome emotional idea of, like, I'm not all alone in the universe, that I'm actually got connection to all beings. I just don't have to put the mysterious woo black hole of mysterious, indescribable something at the middle of it. I can instead use the evidence that's available to experience, to see and experience that. We can go back and read on a little bit further. Now we come to another part of the quiz. This is almost exactly the same as what you see in the Anatalakkhana Sutta, which is the second sutta that the Buddha is said to have given to the first 5 disciples. What do you think? Is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. But if it's impermanent, is it suffering or happiness? Suffering, that's dukkha. If it's impermanent, is it when we say dukkha, stressful, unsatisfactory, out of kilter, misaligned, or sukha, so then it's suffering. Now, this is much more obvious to understand if you go back to what those religious people were thinking about and what they were striving for. They believed that essential oneness. In the Greek philosophy, they called it the one. And the Greeks, by the way, were not isolated from India. So they received a lot of ideas. The philosophers that were before the Buddhist time received a lot of ideas that were like Vedic religious ideas, and that very much affected our Western culture. So then they thought that the one or the essence or the self, the great self, they say that if you could only get in touch with your real self, your real inner self, if you could just connect with your atta, your soul, or the essential principle within you, that's a kind of like a window through which you would be connected with the highest divinity or with the Brahma realm. And when you can discover that self, it's blissful and permanent. It's permanent and blissful. And then your blissful meditation is to meditate on that eternal, beautiful, blissful, divine aspect of the highest, something about existence, the highest existence. And the Buddha is saying, just look at what's in front of you, what we can actually experience. And it's not like that. It's a chimera. It's to pursue finding eternal happiness in that way is a foolish mission, because you will never find it. You will only come to misery and disappointment if you spend your whole life seeking for that. Elsewhere, the Buddha said, if you could have found such that type of a self, he would have taught it, because it would be very pleasant if it existed in that way. And so in here, it's what he's saying is that for each one of these elements, that's not it. So the form is not the self. If it's impermanent, because we know what disappointing the form is, it's always wearing out and breaking down. If it's impermanent and suffering and perishable, is it fit to be regarded as, this is mine, I am this is myself? And this is, again, coming to one of the very famous mystical sentences in the Upanishads, where it says, I am that. I am that. I am existence. I exist. But it's not suitable to say it about the body. And same thing for feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. No one aspect of it, there's no part of what we're able to experience that we could say, this is it. This is where we find that permanent, blissful self. So it's not that the Buddha puts his foot down and says there is no self, but he says that, this self is not to be found among these five aggregates. And then the Buddha continues his argument. What do you think, Agivesana? Consider someone who resorts, draws near, and clings to suffering, regarding it as, this is mine, I am this is myself. Would such a person be able to completely understand suffering themselves, or live having wiped out suffering? How could they? No, Mr. Gautama. This being so, aren't you someone who resorts, draws near, and clings to suffering, regarding it as, this is mine, I am this is myself? How could I not? Yes, Mr. Gautama. So he's admitting defeat. He admits that clinging to the self, he's clinging to suffering. And he considers this is quite a demolition of Agivesana. Suppose there was a person in need of heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood. They'd take a sharp axe and enter the forest. They'd see a big banana tree, straight and young, and grown free of defects. They'd cut it down at the base, cut off the top, and unroll the coiled sheaths of the umbrella, of the banana. But they could not find sapwood, much less heartwood. In the same way, when pursued, pressed, and grilled by me on your own doctrine, you turn out to be vacuous, hollow, and mistaken. But it was you who stated before the assembly, I don't see any ascetic who would not shake, rock, and tremble, sweating from the armpits, were I to take him on in debate, and so on. But the Buddha says, sweat is pouring from your forehead. It's soaked through your robe and drips to the ground, while I now have no sweat on my body. So the Buddha revealed his golden body to the assembly. And when this was said, Saccaka was silent, dismayed, shoulders drooping, downcast, depressed, with nothing to say. Okay, we'll pause here for a second. I'm going to let Damon have a turn since he hasn't spoken yet.
I don't mind waiting for Richard.
Richard, is your hand up fresh?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out, I don't know if it's easily noticeable, but Buddha is the axe man, and he's going to find the heartwood of Saccaka's teaching. And when he cuts it down and it rolls, there's nothing there. It's vacuous. So it's not that Saccaka is the axe man and he went and found his teacher. No, he comes, he challenges the Buddha, says, okay, let's go, let's plunge into the wood. Okay, I've got my axe, my ability to determine what you're saying. Let's see. Cuts down the banana tree or whatever it is, and nothing there. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of fun. Thank you for listening.
I'll call on Damon.
Yeah, I like that analogy with the tree, but so what may not be explicit but may be implied, is it possible in the sutta that it's implied that also attachment to roles, his role as a Brahmin, his role as a knowledgeable, like he could find, I make the mistake often of finding myself in my roles. I must be a lawyer. I must be a husband. I have all these roles that are actually empty as self as well, aren't they?
Yes, they're conditioned and impermanent, filled with suffering, offering very meager and fleeting pleasures, and a lot of difficulties. Every single one of them.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I feel totally inspired by this surrounding story, except I do think that it's very useful to acknowledge that the other point of view, the point of view that the Buddha is demolishing, is a point of view and an idea that did exist among the people at his time. So it was a set of concepts wherein people were organizing their own spiritual quest, and through which they had a certain kinds of understanding of reality. And so by presenting it within this dramatic narrative of the debate, the Buddha is showing a connection between the way in which our Dhamma is presented in the context of the other teachings that were prevalent at the time, and which now that we become more aware of the way that Indian culture and European culture were interacting over many thousands of years, we realize that it's also true that there's a definite contrast between Buddha thought and say modern Western thought of whatever stripe, whether it be religious thought or scientific thought or whatever the popular contemporary ideas we have now. And I also will understand that if a person has got a view, a definite fixed view, and it's almost as if they were born to it because it's the same view that their father had, the same view that their teacher had, the same view that everybody in their club has, and then to be shaken out of one's view, it may be that this kind of strong approach to the debate can be constructive, a skillful means at the time to have that public debate like that. Certain people who would not perhaps listen to just a standard lecture will come to listen to a debate. If I understand, try to understand the outline of the Dhamma just standing by itself, I may find it difficult to work out how the standard Dhamma pertains to me. But if there's a kind of a comparison, and I'm taking the Buddha thought and my own culture and putting them up side by side and letting that bumping of the heads happen internally to really test the Dhamma in the context of whatever culture or understanding I bring to it, then that can be what's necessary to make the Dhamma really meaningful, to make it be awake, for me in my time and place. Okay, Marajana.
I wanted to say, I don't know if it's Saccaka, but I do remember reading a discourse on similar, if not this one, where what Damon was saying was the identity with a role, that Saccaka had this identity, and so he was facing outward. And with the Buddha's it wasn't a simile, but speaking of the kings and their domain, and then turning it towards Saccaka, so Saccaka could see, is that form you? Can you do what you want with that form? And I remember reading that Saccaka was someone who was very unhappy with his form. I don't remember exactly why. Maybe he was bigger than, or uglier or something than he wanted to be, but just, flipping that from looking outward as a role as a great debater, that, he was not humble, back toward himself as a mirror. Well, look at you. Is that form, how you want it to be? Are those feelings how you want them to be? And so, I mean, that silenced him right away. He answered under, the threat of his head being split into 7 pieces. But, it has to come back and apply. And I think, as long as we're looking out,
Yeah.
we can't see these, but they're not that, the khandhas in themselves are not that subtle.
Right. Yes, exactly. It's what's readily available for any of us to consider and to investigate. I want to jump ahead to his question about how he trains, how his disciples practice. In this case, the he says, Mr. Gautama, leave aside the statement I made, as did various other ascetics and Brahmins. It was just like a bit of nonsense. But how do you define a disciple of Mr. Gautama who follows instructions and responds to advice, who has gone beyond doubt, got rid of indecision, gained assurance, and is independent of others in the teacher's instruction? So this is a question about one who is a trainee, one who has obtained the stream, who's a stream winner, who's had the eye-opening insight into the Dhamma. We see other descriptions of the qualities of such a person in terms of their natural, lovable, ethical behavior, their perfect confidence in the Triple Gem, and their right view. And so this is another wonderful teaching about how one should train. And my teacher, Banda Gunaratana, gave me this teaching. One time, a few years ago, I had the opportunity for an interview with him, and mentioned being concerned that as the body and mind are getting older and older, that the mind tends to be more calm, but also more sluggish. And I was concerned about keeping the mind awake. And Bhante said I should memorize this and recite it continuously and reflect on this continuously in order to keep my mindfulness at the best level. So this is a cure for old age and a protection against becoming senile, as well as the way that a person would train if they were a trainee in the Buddha's teaching. When one of my disciples truly sees any kind of form at all, past, future, or present, internal or external, solid or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all form with right understanding. This is not mine, I am not this is not myself. They truly see any kind of feeling, past, future, present, internal or external, solid or subtle, inferior, superior, far and near, all feeling they see with right understanding. This is not mine, I am not this is not myself. Any perception whatsoever, past, future, present, internal, external, solid, subtle, inferior, superior, far and near, all perception seen with right understanding. This is not mine, I am not this is not myself. Any formations or any volitional formations, any at all, past, future, present, internal, external, solid or subtle, inferior, superior, far, near, all volitional formations, seen with right understanding. This is not mine, I'm not this is not myself. All cognition at all consciousness at all, past, future, present, internal, external, solid, subtle, inferior, superior, far or near, all cognition or all consciousness, should be seen with right understanding as it is. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. That's how to define one of my disciples who follows instruction, responds to advice, who's gone beyond doubt, got rid of indecision, gained assurance independent of others and teachers' instructions. And then the follow-up question, how to define a mendicant who is a perfected one, with the defilements ended, who has completed his spiritual journey, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, achieved their goal, utterly ended the fetter of continued existence, rightly freed through enlightenment. It's when the mendicant truly sees any kind of form at all, form, feeling, perception, and so forth, with the right understanding, not mine, I'm not this not myself. And having seen it with right understanding, they are freed by not grasping. Having seen any one of these, you multiplied 5 khandhas by past, future, present, internal, external, coarse, fine, inferior, superior, near, far. There's like 9 kinds of, so that's 45 different moments of being aware of phenomenon. So any one of these 45 things, if you see a subtle moment of consciousness, if you see a gross moment of consciousness, a past moment of consciousness, a future moment of consciousness, all of them are seen correctly as they are. And having seen, one becomes freed by not grasping. Anupada. They have 3 unsurpassable qualities: unsurpassable seeing, unsurpassable practice, and unsurpassable freedom. They honor, respect, esteem, and venerate only the realized one. The Blessed One is awakened, tame, serene, crossed over, and quenched. He teaches the Dhamma for awakening, self-control, serenity, crossing over, and extinguishment. So, dear friends, as kind of the culmination of the sutta, to my mind, even more so than the story, is the suggestion about what it would be like to be a trainee in this training and to have this as the constant way of practicing. And then to whatever extent one is able to see it really as it is and not become blinded by distraction each time there's a pleasant or unpleasant thing coming along, but instead to stay clear and to see each moment, no matter how pleasant or no matter how unpleasant, to see it like it really is. Not me, not mine, not myself. And that will come to freedom without grasping. I may again call on Aya Marajana to see if you have a closing thought about this particular sutta.
Just to say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Aya, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Maureen?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It strikes me that the Buddha was phenomenally successful in matching his teachings to the person he was teaching. And I mean, I'm contrasting this sutta with last week's sutta, where he was giving the Brahmins the opportunity of, in their Brahmin world, to make the final steps to Nibbana. And he was saying they have work to do there. I thought about that sutta for quite a while after you did it. And this one, he freed this fella from the awful role he'd been landed in. And the man was grateful for that freedom. And the suttas kind of, they illustrate that phenomenal ability to do it. The thing you missed out in my book that I was following was the crab that had all of its legs smashed.
Yes.
And you didn't even mention that. And the what's his name, Saccaka, yeah, he rejected. He said, that's not what this is about. He just was grateful for the teaching he'd just received. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Thank you.
According to the commentary, Saccaka was subsequently reborn as a noble in Sri Lanka and had obtained his final full awakening there. So he was not able to make it in this lifetime, but by the power of what the Buddha had been able to plant in his mind, even like demolishing, or you're talking about breaking the head in 7 pieces. Well, at least the wrong views got smashed up into 7 pieces, so that he was no longer able to just go on coasting in a cocoon of wrong views, but instead being open to investigate along these lines. Yeah. Okay, let's close by giving respect to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savakasamno Sangham Namami. Thank you, everybody, for your patient listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aya.
This Thursday coming up is going to be the full moon day, and that's the beginning of Mahapajapati months. And we're not doing a public program for this part of it, but between Thursday for the following 7 days, that's when Mahapajapati gave a continuous 7-day Dhamma talk, reciting the sutras for 7 days. So if you wanted to honor the founder of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, the Buddha's stepmother, who nurtured him as an infant, and the one who was the leader of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, starting from the full moon coming up, if you would make a special effort to read the suttas and reflect about the suttas. And then on the 20th of this month, we'll have a special, that's also a Thursday, there's going to be a special Dhamma program here in addition to our regular programs focused on our founding mother of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, Arhat Mahapajapati.